For the last 2.5 centuries, some of the smartest people on the planet have been chasing a ghost. It's this powerful, almost invisible force that shapes literally everything in our world. It's the secret of economic growth. So, in this explainer, we're going to join the hunt. Let's see if we can crack this 250-year-old case. Our whole investigation really kicks off with this one fundamental question. Why are some places in the world incredibly wealthy, while others are trapped in poverty? And let me tell you, this huge gap we see in living standards, it's no accident. It is a direct result of this mysterious force. If we can understand it, we can understand the shape of our entire modern world.
Okay, so take a look at this. This chart, it's basically the scene of the crime. For almost all of human history, life was, to put it bluntly, completely stagnant. Generation after generation, things barely changed. Then, right around 1800, something absolutely explosive happened. Economic growth just took off like a rocket ship. The big question is, what lit the fuse?
So our first detectives on the scene were the founders of modern economics themselves. They were standing there, watching this new world emerge right before their eyes, and they were scrambling to make sense of it all. And, as you'll see, they came to wildly different conclusions about where humanity was headed.
And the lead detective here? None other than Adam Smith. Back in 1776, he had this totally groundbreaking insight. He said, hey, the secret to a nation's wealth isn't gold or land, it's the division of labor. The idea is that when people specialize, like in his famous pin factory example, they get ridiculously good and fast at their one specific task. And this kicks off a kind of virtuous self-reinforcing cycle. More productivity means more wealth, which allows for even more specialization.
But yeah, not everyone was buying into this happy story. You had thinkers like Thomas Malthus and David Ricardo, and they saw a much darker future. They basically argued that any little bit of progress was a trap. Any extra wealth would just lead to more people, and all those new mouths would eat up all the extra resources, pushing society right back to where it started. For them, any growth was just temporary, doomed to end in a stagnant state.
So right when this big debate between hope and despair is really heating up, a powerful new clue enters the investigation. And this clue, it was a total game changer. It was so disruptive that it changed the very nature of the mystery we're trying to solve. And that clue was relentless innovation. And this quote, man, it just perfectly nails the new thinking. Economists like Joseph Schumpeter, and he was even building on some ideas from Karl Marx, they realized growth isn't this smooth, calm river. No way. It's a storm of creative destruction, where new technologies and new ideas are constantly destroying old industries to make way for the new. Growth, they figured out, is messy, chaotic, and it never stops. So all this chaos led to this new kind of scary idea, that the whole system is super unstable. An economist named Evsey Domar, he argued that a capitalist economy is balanced on what he called the fil du rasoir, the razor's edge. If investment grows just a little too fast, you get a recession. A little too slow, you get inflation. It seemed like the entire system was just inherently fragile, always one step away from disaster.
All right, let's fast forward to the 1950s. A new detective steps onto the scene, Robert Solow. And this guy, he brings this really cool, methodical approach that seems to fix that whole instability problem. But in solving one mystery, he ends up uncovering an even deeper, more profound one.
Okay, so here's how Solow's Nobel-winning model works. It's actually pretty elegant. First, he gets rid of that scary razor's edge by assuming you can just swap out machines for workers or vice versa. That stabilizes things. Second, he said growth comes from two really simple things, adding more workers and adding more capital, tools and machines. But then he stumbles onto something truly mind-blowing. Most of the real-world growth he saw in the data, it wasn't coming from more workers or more tools. It was coming from this mystery ingredient he just called technology.
And that brings us to this number, 2%. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. Think about it. For more than 150 years, through world wars, depressions, you name it, the U.S. economy keeps coming back to this 2% average growth rate. It's incredibly consistent. Solow's model could explain why growth was so stable, but that mysterious technological engine driving that 2%, it was still a complete black box.
So this is the giant question Solow leaves hanging in the air for the next generation of economic detectives. He proved that technology was the engine of all long-term prosperity, for sure, but he had no idea what was going on inside that engine. Where does it even come from? Is it just random luck, or is it something we can actually create on purpose?
And that brings us pretty much to the modern era. Starting around the 1980s, you get this new team of economic sleuths, people like Paul Romer and Robert Lucas, and they start using what you could call modern forensic tools to finally crack open Solo's black box and figure out what that mystery ingredient really is.
So what did they find in there? Well, for starters, technology isn't some magical force that just falls out of the sky. It's what they call endogenous, which is just a fancy way of saying it's created from inside the system by the choices we make. That comes from companies deliberately investing in R&D, from all of us investing in our education and skills, what they call human capital, and, crucially, from societies creating the right institutions, the rules of the game, things like stable government, property rights, and the rule of law.
And this new way of thinking, it really helps explain why the world looks so unequal. If growth is all about making the right choices and having the right institutions, then it suddenly makes sense why we don't just see poor countries automatically catching up to rich ones. It's just not how it works.
What we actually see is something called conditional convergence. And a car race analogy is perfect here. You wouldn't expect a beat-up old jalopy to catch a Formula One racer, right? They're in totally different classes. But within the group of Formula One cars, the slower ones do tend to catch up to the faster ones over time. It's because they're all playing by the same rules of the game.
And you can see the proof of this all over the world. Just since World War II, we've seen at least 4 totally different stories unfold. You've got the growth miracles, like South Korea, which had this explosive catch-up phase. You've got the steady growers, like the US, plugging away at that 2%. Then you have countries that have basically stagnated, like Ghana. And tragically, you have growth disasters, like Venezuela, which has actually gone backward on average. It's just powerful evidence that the choices a country makes have these massive, long-term consequences.
So, let's step back. After this 250-year-long investigation, where do we stand? Well, we've gathered an incredible number of clues. We've gone from the simple idea of just dividing up labor to the chaotic and powerful force of innovation, and now all the way to understanding how we can intentionally create new knowledge.
I mean, what a journey this has been. It started with Adam Smith and his pin factory. Then you had the deep pessimism of Malthus and Ricardo worrying about hard limits. That view was blown away by Schumpeter's creative destruction, which was then organized and tamed by Solow, who pointed his fingers straight at technology as the key. And now, finally, we're figuring out what technology actually is. It's R&D, it's our skills, it's the very rules we live by.
And yet, the case isn't closed, not by a long shot. Because after all this time trying to figure out how to start growth, we're now staring down the biggest question of all, one that a lot of those early detectives completely missed. On a planet with finite resources, can this engine of growth keep running forever? Is a happy ending even possible? That's the mystery our generation has to solve.